please subscribe and don't forget to press the bell icon to get notified whenever we upload a new video.
Good evening, you're watching CNBC-TV18 and this is After the Bell. Here's a look at the top stories that we're tracking for you at this hour. Infosys co-founder and former CEO Nandan Nilekani expected to be brought back to head the tech major and ride through the crisis. Clarity on Nandan's role expected in the next 48 hours. That's a CNBC-TV18 exclusive.
No, the Prime Minister will take a decision on whatever request the Railway Minister has made.
Railway Minister Suresh Prabhu takes moral responsibility of the recent accidents, offers his resignation to Prime Minister Modi. The Prime Minister asks him to wait.
The decision regarding creating strong and competitive banks would be solely based on commercial considerations.
The Cabinet gives an in-principle nod for the merger of public sector banks. Finance Minister Jaitley said that any PSB except SBI can come up with a merger proposal, decides to take the alternate investment mechanism route just like it did with Air India. Dalal Street shrugs away its blues as bank stocks rally almost 1.5%. The Nifty recaptures 9,850, while the Sensex rallies 270 points. Mid-caps also gain about 1% in trade.
Not just 6-7%, we'll love to see it in double digits.
Steel industry, if I take the overall NPAs in that industry, it's as high as 19%.
The SEAL secretary exudes confidence that better times await the industry. SBI chairman Arundhati Bhattacharya, however, says the lack of transparency is a major hurdle for the sector and NPAs need to be brought down faster. Malegaon blast accused Lieutenant Colonel Purohit walks out on bail after 9 years in jail. Sources tell Network 18 he's likely to rejoin the army and be posted in Pune or Colaba. Well, the battle between the Infosys board and its founders, exacerbated post the resignation of Sikka last Friday, continues to be our top focus this Wednesday evening. And over the last 12 hours, there have been three crucial developments. Let's quickly take you through all of those. First, late last night, CNBC-TV18 broke the news that several leading institutional investors have written to the board asking for Nandan Nilekani to be appointed as a director. The investors wrote, and I quote, "In our opinion, Nandan Nilekani enjoys the confidence of various stakeholders vis-a-vis customers, shareholders and employees. Given his credentials, we feel that his joining the board at this stage will restore confidence of stakeholders in the company and also facilitate the resolution of the contentious issues that Infosys is facing presently." Now, that's the letter that came in from domestic institutional investors to the Infosys board. The second big development, Infosys co-founder N. Narayana Murthy was supposed to address investors today for the first time post Sikka's resignation from the post of managing director and CEO. Remember that both the Infosys board and Sikka cited Murthy's constant bickering and personal attacks as the reason behind that decision. But earlier today, Mr. Murthy rescheduled the conference to the 29th of August, citing health reasons. And then the big CNBC-TV18 exclusive news break that we broke this morning. We learned from sources that Nandan Nilekani may be brought back to head Infosys, at least for now. What I am also given to understand is we could have more clarity on this over the next 48 hours. What is going to be the exact role, designation, etc. Those are matters that are under consideration at this point in time. But Nandan Nilekani could be the man who tries to steer the ship through troubled waters. For more, we're now joined by the former CFO of Infosys, V. Balakrishnan. Bala, domestic institutional investors writing to the Infosys board seeking the return of Nandan as a director. You on my program have also several times spoken of the need to reconstitute the board for the chairman and the co-chairman to resign. And you've also said that it would be a good idea to bring Nandan back because he has the authority, the credentials, and will act as a bridge between the old and the new. If this were to go through, do you believe that this could be the start of the repair process?
I think so. I think the core issue at Infosys today is the governance issue, the failure of the board, and the resultant destruction of shareholders' value. So I think a person like Nandan coming as chairman of the board and stabilizing the ship will give comfort to all the stakeholders, whether it's the employees, investors or clients. Because Nandan is a very good global face. He is well recognized both in India and outside India. He is part of Aadhaar, which is a large complex project implementation, the government of India, and he had a great strength earlier in Infosys. So I think a face like him coming to the INFI board will stabilize the whole ship.
You know, you're saying that Nandan will come back as chairman, and as I pointed out, and I have been pointing that out through the morning when I broke the story, that I still don't have confirmation on the exact role and designation that Nandan will perhaps come back as. You know, is he going to be the replacement for Vishal Sikka? Is he going to come and replace, for instance, the current chairman, Seshasai and Ravi Venkateshan? Those are questions I'm still waiting for answers to. But in your assessment, do you think that if at all Nandan returns, it would be in the capacity of chairman?
Yeah, see, Nandan coming back is speculative at this point of time. I don't know whether the board has reached out to him or whether he has shown any intent, because last time when Nandan was approached, he clearly said he had no interest. So even if you assume Nandan comes back, my view is he should come as a chairman of the board, and I think he has to reconstitute the board. Some of the members, like the current chair and co-chair, should step down because there was a huge governance failure and destruction of shareholders' value. He has to reconstitute the board and help in identifying a good CEO and create some kind of a balance between founders, the board, and the institutional shareholders. I think a person like him will be able to get all the people together and find a ideal solution.
If we were to look at some of the constituents of the board, Mr. Seshasai, the current chairman, his term, I'm given to understand, ends in 2018. Mr. Lehman's term, I think, is another 6 months away from its end as well. So do you see the possibility of at least individuals whose term is close to expiration, perhaps being the ones who may tender in their resignation, who may decide to hang up their boots, so to speak? And also, do you believe, and this is an assumption we're making at this point in time, that Nandan is going to return, that this will be an interim solution till they actually find the right man to replace Vishal Sikka?
No, I think the company will not be able to attract any good CEO candidate unless you fix a core issue in the company, that is the board governance. So you have to find a solution to get a balanced board which will take care of interests of all the shareholders, bring in confidence, bring in back the values, governance, and other core principles of Infosys. So I think the starting point for selecting a good CEO is to have a balanced board. That is where I believe Nandan coming back will be good. He should become the chairman, reconstitute the board, because some of the failures happened in Infosys. The board has not fixed any responsibility. I clearly believe at least 4 people should go: the chairman, the co-chairman, the head of audit committee, and head of nomination committee. Because if you look at all the failures which happened on the governance front, I think these are the people who are responsible. So I definitely believe that board has to be reconstituted first before you search for a good CEO.
Okay. Let me end then, Bala, by asking you, I mean, you've spent many years working with Nandan. Nandan decided to even leave Infosys before Mr. Murthy gave up on Infosys, so to speak. And as you rightly pointed out, there has been a hesitation for him to return to Infosys in any formal capacity, because he has, in a sense, moved on. So do you think that this really, in a sense, is Nandan's way of trying to rescue the company he founded? If at all he does agree to do this.
I think for all of us, including Murthy and Nandan, we are both a financial institution, also an emotional investor in the institution called Infosys. So when the institution is in crisis and you need some of us to step in and bring some kind of a semblance, I think the board, if they approach them, probably they may consider, because majority of the wealth of all the founders is in Infosys stock. Majority of the emotional investment is in that stock. So I think if the appropriate approaches happen, probably they may consider, I don't know.
Well, we will have to wait for an official confirmation. As I've been pointing out, I have tried to reach out to Mr. Murthy, to Nandan himself, to Mr. Seshasai, as well as Ravi Venkateshan, but no response so far. This is, of course, source-based information. Bala, always a pleasure. Many thanks for joining us here on CNBC-TV18. But on to the other big story tonight. After 3 train tragedies in less than a week, Railway Minister Suresh Prabhu has offered to resign from his post. In fact, in a series of tweets that he put out just a short while ago, the minister said, and I quote, "In less than 3 years as minister, I've devoted my blood and sweat for the betterment of the railways. Under the leadership of the Prime Minister, I've tried to overcome decades of neglect through systemic reforms in all areas, leading to unprecedented investment and milestones." The Railway Minister also said, and I quote again, "New India envisioned by the Prime Minister deserves a railways which is efficient and modern. I promise that is the path on which the railways is progressing," end of quote. However, Prabhu then went on to say, and I quote, "I'm extremely pained by the unfortunate accidents, injuries to passengers and loss of precious lives. It's caused me deep anguish. I met the Honourable Prime Minister taking full moral responsibility. The Prime Minister has asked me to wait." Now, Suresh Prabhu has offered to resign at a time when there is a strong buzz of a cabinet reshuffle in the works. In fact, Network 18 learns that a reshuffle could be on the anvil within the next few days. To discuss the possibility of Suresh Prabhu's resignation as well as the cabinet reshuffle, I have with me on the phone line political editor at Business Standard, Aditi Fadnis, and also with me in the studio, Shailesh Kumar of Eurasia Group. Thanks very much, Shailesh and Aditi, for joining us. Aditi, let me start by asking you, Suresh Prabhu, tweeting saying, "I accept full moral responsibility. I've offered to resign. The Prime Minister has asked me to wait." Finance Minister Jaitley addressing a press conference a short while ago, also saying that it will be the Prime Minister's decision and he will look at Suresh Prabhu's request. Do you think that this is, in the end, now going to be Prabhu's exit from the Railway Ministry? And we've seen this happen a few months ago as well.
Suresh Prabhu was tipped to leave the Railway Ministry in any case. Frankly, the Railway Ministry is no longer what it used to be. And Prabhu has more or less decided on its, if I may call it, disempowerment. I mean, I don't think there's any surprises there. What we were hearing was that he may be moved to the Ministry of Roads and Highways, which will be vacant after Nitin Gadkari is moved to the Ministry of Defence. But this was some time ago, and but in any case, I think some kind of a decision had already been taken earlier that Prabhu is no longer required in the Ministry of Railways.
Why would you say that? Is that because of the merger of the railway budget with the union budget, Aditi?
Well, I think a lot of changes have to be brought about in the railways, and these have to be structural changes. My own feeling is that the first priority for the Prime Minister, if he is re-elected, I would rather say if and when he is re-elected after the general elections, is going to be the railways. We know that the railways is the largest employer of people, the largest state-owned entity which employs more than 13 lakh people. We know that the pattern of financing the railways is not really sustainable. We also know that there is a great deal of corruption and a great deal of, and yet the railways work seamlessly. And frankly, it's a mystery to many of us how it continues to work the way it does. So it's a very, very complex ministry. And I think it needs to be looked at with really fresh eyes.
Okay, we thought that those that the fresh perspective was going to be brought by Suresh Prabhu, but you're saying that perhaps his exit was already on the cards and on the anvil. But let me bring in the former Railway Minister Dinesh Trivedi into this conversation. Mr. Trivedi, many thanks for joining us. We've seen the railways put out its version saying that, look, whether it's the safety record, it's the derailment record, there is a lot of myth that's being perpetuated in the media and so on and so forth. But that apart, would you be surprised at all if Suresh Prabhu were to go?
Well, I think we leave it to the Honorable Prime Minister. He's the captain of the team, and he would take the right decision, whichever is good for the railways and the country. So I would really leave it to the Prime Minister. And I think that's the best thing to do, rather than speculate this.
Now, I won't get you to comment on what happens with Mr. Prabhu, but on the need of the hour, you know, when Suresh Prabhu came in, there was this long list of items that he had put on the agenda in terms of reforms for the railways and so on and so forth. A safety coach was set up, you know, and look where we are today. Now, Aditi Fadnis also saying that we need to look at the railways in a completely different perspective with a new pair of eyes. As former railway minister, you know, what is the need of the hour today?
I agree with Aditi. She knows railways very well. I can only tell you the basic foundation of the railway has been shaken up. We need to concentrate on basics. We need to reinforce the very foundation of the railway, and I'm talking about the structural foundation. And I think somewhere down the line we have lost our priorities, and that's a worrisome situation, because given the fact railway still remains one of the best organizations, not only in India but in the world. So given a proper direction and leadership, railways still can turn around. But we have to understand the strength of Indian railways. And I'm very proud that the railway is still good. But at the moment, I must tell you, having said that, the entire railway staff and the board is totally demoralized, because I have nothing against any individual, but you can't disturb the system. You have given promotion to a chairman who had retired as if there was no other talent. And this chairman also is not really a technical person. He comes from stores. That's okay. It doesn't matter. But somewhere down the line, you cannot demoralize people, because everybody's promotion has been stopped. So your priorities have changed, so nobody gives a damn. So you have to work as a big, huge team. And the job of the minister is to give direction and motivate everybody like a captain of the team.
Okay, Shailesh, you were in fact at the Railway Ministry this morning. In light of the developments that have taken place, how is this going to go down, for instance, with foreign investors who've been looking at the India infrastructure story and the railway story in specific?
So I think railways, or what's been happening with railways, is an indication for the need to finance infrastructure and invest in infrastructure. And one of the things that's interesting about railways is they have been opening up the market. They have been looking towards foreign investors. The ministry itself is now beginning to find innovative ways of financing its needs. So I think this was an area that foreign investors probably had a lot of interest in, and they're probably going to have a lot of interest in. But again, you do need a little bit more to be done on this front. A lot of good work has been done, but in general, more needs to be done. But the infrastructure story in India is still very promising. There was a lot of hiccups a couple of years ago where a lot of deals didn't go through. That's now changing, and I think this is an area that a lot of foreign investors are interested in, and they will continue to show a lot of interest in.
Okay. Aditi, back to you. You know, once again, the buzz around this cabinet reshuffle, we've been listening to these stories for months now, but this time around, do you believe that that by the weekend, perhaps we could have more clarity? And you talked about, for instance, Nitin Gadkari moving to the Ministry of Defence. The Bombay buzz seems to suggest that there's a portfolio in the reckoning for somebody like Amit Shah also. What is the latest that you've been able to gather from the buzz in the capital?
Okay, first of all, with the initial disclaimer that this is all speculation and gossip and no one really knows the mind of the Prime Minister, I can share with you and your viewers what I've been hearing. Number one, that from sources in Chennai, which means the All India Anna DMK sources, which, as you know, is probably going to join the government, or if not join the government, then at least be part of the decision-making apparatus in the NDA. Of the
NDA, yeah.
We are hearing that the reshuffle may be on the 28th or 29th of this month. This is what they have been led to understand. We are expecting that the Janata Dal United will probably join the government. There has been a meeting between Rajiv Pratap Rudy, Minister from Bihar, who is in the Skill Development Ministry, as well as Upendra Kushwaha, and they have met the Prime Minister. What has transpired, we don't know. We are hearing that Foreign Minister Sushma Swaraj may have been given charge of monitoring most central projects, the progress of most central projects. What does that tell us? That tells us that she may even be on her way to being elevated to something which is equivalent to, I don't know, a deputy prime minister maybe.
Really?
She, it seems, has, well, what we're hearing, it may not be correct. And I'm sorry to be irresponsible, but, you know, this is too delicious a piece of information not to share.
No, I completely agree with you. It is too delicious.
The other things that we are, of course, it will be a big reshuffle because, you know, the people involved are there are important portfolios which have to be allocated. Defense and finance cannot be the same person. It's not humanly possible to give attention to both. Urban development is vacant, and we know that that's also an important portfolio given the priorities of the government. You need to have a full number of full-time governors, which means that governors either have to be chosen from existing ministers or like people or beyond a certain age, which is the kind of informal consensus in the government that young people have to be given a push. And you also need to have, I mean, Tamil Nadu is facing a big problem, so you need to have a full-time governor for Tamil Nadu. Similarly, in 3 or 4 other states. You need to have a senior minister for minority affairs because, you know, now it's going to be a very important portfolio and so on.
Right.
So,
so...
And plus, you need to have greater representation from Karnataka, which is going for the polls in the near future.
For the polls, Well, thanks very much, Aditi Fadnis, for sharing those interesting tidbits that you've picked up. One thing, as we've not been reporting, is that a reshuffle is on the anvil. Is it going to happen this weekend, or is it going to happen on the 28th or 29th, as Aditi is pointing out? That is something that we need to get a confirmation on. And caveats, and I'm underlining this once again, this is all speculation at this point in time. This is not confirmed information. This is source-based information. But Aditi and Dinesh Trivedi, appreciate you joining us here on CNBC-TV18. Shailesh, a quick word on the likely contenders and the changes and how this cabinet reshuffle is going to be seen?
Yeah, I think so. Minister Jaitley, you know, he has 2 portfolios. So I think a lot of people have been questioning how he could possibly handle both defense and finance and doing an adequate job. So I think that would be welcome to see more continuity or have him focus on one and not the other. I think Piyush Goyal is often viewed by foreign investors as a very up-and-coming star, given what he's done with in the energy and renewable space. So having him in an ministry would be welcome. So I think a cabinet reshuffle is overdue, something that investors are eagerly looking forward to.
Okay, so let me move now from domestic issues and talk to you, Shailesh, about what's happening with Trump and his view of the world. We just heard him make his speech on South Asia, and the good news for India is that he's talked and called out Pakistan for supporting terror. But perhaps, you know, cause for concern that in the context of rebuilding Afghanistan, this trade deficit business has been brought up yet again by President Trump. You know, I spoke with you when Prime Minister Modi was in DC. Post that, and in the light of what we've just heard from President Trump, how do you piece it all together? So
the statements, if we go through line by line, were very negative on Pakistan. And if we omit the part about the trade deficit, we're very positive on India. And it was a remarkable shift from what the U.S. has said in the past with respect to India's role in the region. My take on it is that he had to say something so that it was a little bit more balanced. And the something ended up being the trade deficit issue. This is something he's talked about in the past. Of all the potential negatives that he can find about any country, including India, this is the only one for India. So that's why this was probably inserted in there. He needs to say something. But on balance, I think this was extremely positive. I think people on the Indian side are very happy with what he said. It's a recognition of India's role in the region, and it's a big, big shift from what we've seen from the U.S. policy in the past.
A quick word on how the U.S. is seeing the standoff between India and China at this point in time.
So they've been very quiet, and that's, I think, important to note. They've been quiet. They haven't taken sides. Behind the scenes, though, I think there is a recognition of India's point on the standoff, that there's going to be constant border skirmishes. This is happening in a third country. So to be honest, I don't think the U.S. fully knows what to make of it, and I also don't think that they want to comment on it at this point in time. But on the fundamentals, I get the impression that they are concerned about China's role in the region. They do, again, see India as the dominant player in the region. The statement that came out addresses that. And with that in mind, they want to see, they probably want to back India on this more than anyone else.
My final question, Shailesh, what is the expectation now, given the fact that the first meeting has happened between the two leaders, in terms of actually taking stuff forward? I mean, we've got that Global Entrepreneurship Summit, which Ivanka Trump is going to be headed to India, leading the US delegation. But beyond that, in terms of getting business done, what would the expectation be for India and the US?
So the Entrepreneurship Summit or aggregating or convening is probably the most important thing right now. The models of US governance and Indian governance make it very difficult for either leader to actually facilitate business transactions. There's a lot of expectations on that front, but it's just very challenging for a US president to tell businesses to invest in India and vice versa. So I think the forum or the atmosphere needs to be created. The bigger focus for both leaders is going to continue to be security and defense, which is where they'll focus. Whether that means military acquisitions or whether that means Make in India through military programs, that can help build a bedrock for deeper business engagements. So I think that's where the priority is going to be.
Are you hearing anything more on Lockheed's bid for pushing the F-16 to India?
So we know they're interested and that they want to sell this plane to India. I think either way, their arrangement with the Tatas is going to mean that they're going to build it in India one way or another. Whether the Indian government chooses to buy it is a different point, but I think what their agreement signifies is that they're ready to do this. It's now India's choice whether they want to take them up on the deal or not.
Well, Shailesh, it's been a pleasure. Thanks very much for joining us here on CNBC-TV18 to discuss a whole host of issues. Appreciate your time. With that, it is time for us to wrap up this edition of After the Bell. But